writing stories. But really, more than anything, the most important message is this connection the writer has to establish with the reader, especially with graded readers. I think there's an intimate relationship between reader, much more intimate than maybe other kinds of writing. And that's what I really focus on, what I try to do when I write a story. What I try to do when then something will come on, and what I try to do when I write a story.
Time now for question and answer, but I will start by me asking them questions, but afterwards I'm going to invite you to ask any questions you might have about their presentation, about anything related to extensive reading, viewing, and also extensive listening. Let me just start off by asking my dear friend here, Doreen, about her presentation, fluency and easy materials. I like easy materials. But whenever almost all of them will say, if the materials are easy, what do my students learn from easy materials? We want to challenge our students. We want to introduce new stuff, new grammar, new structure, new vocabulary. But why easy materials? What is it about easy materials that you are discussing yesterday?
Can I just use my teacher voice?
Yes.
All right. So, easy material is not the only thing that we give our students. But when we want to build fluency, we can't also be asking for complexity and a lot of new information. We can't build fluency and complexity at the same time. This is both theoretically and empirically supported. One, we learn mostly about the language through implicit language learning. That doesn't happen without huge quantities of language. We will never get huge quantities of language into our brains if it's all difficult. One, we quit. Two, it's very slow. Okay? So we need to have lots of language. The other factor is that, as Seidenberg points out, language is full of so much complexity that we couldn't possibly teach it all. So even when we get a lot of language within our proficiency range, what does that mean? We understood the vocabulary. What about all the variety of the forms of that vocabulary? What about all the inference, all the collocations? What about text structure? What about syntax? There is so much that we cannot teach that, in fact, if we're just getting more examples of the language into our brain is figuring it out for us. It's not the only thing we do. There are times in the class when we give them things that push people, right, to move beyond that. I'm a proponent of pushing students with some intentional, explicit vocabulary activity. But we underrepresent the vast amounts of language that has to go in. A good study back in 2014, Begler and Hunt looked at, we already know that when people do extensive reading, they can build their reading rate. So they looked more closely to find out whether, was it the level of the student, was it the type of book, what was going on. And here's what they found out. They found out that the students who knew all the vocabulary read the most. Well, when do you know all the vocabulary? When it's super easy. So the ones who read the most got the most gain in terms of reading rate and comprehension. But they had to read easy. So they thought perhaps we need to re-articulate the ER theme of reading well within your linguistic, competence, and change that and say, you should be reading at the very lowest level, at the entry to your, linguistic competence. Not at the edge of your linguistic competence, but absolutely at the threshold, so that you just read more. Easy, more language, more learning, more benefit.
And more implicit knowledge.
And more implicit knowledge.
Often happens in the classroom is that 80 to 90% of the time that happens in the classroom is the explicit teaching. Are we doing the wrong thing then?
We're doing a good thing too much. There is definitely a place for explicit teaching. You know, really interesting research from the European Science Foundation, that part of the European Union. So when we had workers suddenly freely moving all around, it was like a natural language experiment, and they researched it. And what we find is that, for example, and I'm not talking academics now, workers moving from country to country, they can move into a country, start doing the job in 2 years. They are fluent. I didn't say highly proficient. They're fluent in the language. They can do everything they need to do in the language, and they are past the pragmatic stage. They're past the lexical stage, and they are in the beginning of grammaticalization. That's when they should have explicit instruction. We've got it backwards. We start with explicit, and they never get enough language to even know what's right and what's wrong with what they're producing. You have to know enough language, use enough language to recognize, oh, I have a gap there. Oh, when I know I've got a gap, now I'm going to pay attention to the learning.
Rob has something to say. Rob Waring,
Yes, in Japan there's an organization called Start with Simple Stories.
Wonderful thing. Is there anything that technology can be leveraged on in order to help teachers to make materials easier to comprehend so that the students can develop fluency and also develop their implicit knowledge? We've got a panel member who has been doing a lot of good stuff on technology.
Right, so
Try this.
right, so I'm going to give this one a try here. Day one, during the workshop, pre-conference workshop, I talk about AI and how AI can help us write branching narratives. And a lot of people got really excited about that because many people don't see that artificial intelligence and technology in general has the capacity of helping us teachers to produce something. So not all of us are writers. So that's one area in which technology will be able to help in terms of creating input or helping teachers write books. It doesn't have to be like ready-made books, but it can give us ideas of, you know, topics that our students are interested in, and then work with that. And it can also be a starting point for our students when they want to write or produce something.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. AI can read, can understand, and also can write. Do we still need people like Michael? Where we can ask technology to write a wonderful piece, not so wonderful, but fairly good, you know, stories for children, for adults, for teenagers and all that. Michael?
Good question, great question. But can you hear me okay? Okay, yeah, well, partly the thing is, I think, with when I'm writing stories, I use emotions. That's what I was talking about this morning, that my stories are driven by emotion. I think it's one of the things that it's an area where technology, where artificial intelligence can't really go so easily. And so I think, you know, when I've seen examples, I'm not saying this is always going to be the case, but when I see examples of stories generated by artificial intelligence, it lacks that aspect to it, yeah. That human touch, yeah. It lacks that. It reads more like a synopsis of a story than a story. But I think with stories, they can express complex emotions, complex situations, simple language. That was one of the main points of my talk, that, you know, you can use simple language to express complexity, and use the fact that the gaps, use the fact that students can fill in the gaps with their own experiences and with their own kind of life experiences, let's say. Because that's the road I try to travel, and I think it is a road which artificial intelligence, well, it's not there yet. I'm not saying it will be, it won't ever be, but
Great answer. Can I just invite the audience to maybe ask questions if you have been doing extensive reading and if you encounter any issues, maybe you can share with us, ask your question, and maybe answer your own questions as well. That's okay too. Very often in conferences like this, people ask questions when they already know the answers. Yes, please. Anyone? Any questions? No judgment. Any questions are fine. Yes, please go ahead, sir.
I guess this is kind of for really anybody, but has anybody ever considered?
We are not the only experts here. I think everybody is an expert. Use the microphone. Upstairs.
So during COVID, sorry. So during pandemic, we have a project. At first, the project was designed for the kids, but then we understand that our participant was too young. They were too young to be with us in the literacy session. So the hardest part was not finding children, but the hardest part was inviting the parents to be part of the program. It was challenging. Usually parents are excited to send their children in any reading program, but being inside their kids is another story. So we work with Let's Read, the platform, if you are familiar with that. We ask both parents and children visit Let's Read and then choose the story that they like, read together before they see us via Zoom. Yeah, so that's the how we involve the parents in the program. We have we didn't ask the parent to we didn't give them reflective questions, something like that, but we have a short video for the parents to tell us how the program benefit to the kids, and they're most welcome. But the point is that taking them to be part of the program at the first time is the true challenge.